All right. Welcome to the Missing the Mark podcast, episode 2. Today we're going to talk about the XFL. Is it viable? Will it succeed? We're going to talk about controversies in many sports, including the MLB, more news on the Astros and their whole situation, and proposed playoff expansion. We're going to talk about the NHL. Jesus Christ, what were they doing? And we're going to talk about the UEFA Champions League, more specifically, Man City. So, as always, I'm Graham Solomos with my host, Garrett Narowski, and I guess today we're going to start off with the XFL. First things first, how do you feel about the new, I wouldn't say new rules, but variations in the rules compared to the NFL? Like, 1 foot's down, only needed for a catch. The kickoff, the difference in the kickoff, pace of play with the running clock, similar to soccer, and just all the other little nuances that comes along with the XFL. So,
Honestly, I like it. A lot of the stuff that they did, I liked. Some things they did take. One thing I think probably did the best that separates it from the NFL is just simply the replay booth. I mean, the changes on the field are cool, but I think what would be the best part for the NFL to steal from the XFL would probably be having a camera in a live feed to the replay booth in the stadium or in their offices. So when there's ever a call being disputed, people can hear.
So there's some similar. So in rugby, I think is got the best replay, and this is just me, just because in rugby, you hear the audio between the on the field referee and the in the booth replay referee, right? So in rugby, you basically, the on the field ref says, "This is what we're looking for. Tell me whether or not it happened." And so you hear the communication, and so the replay officials are going to go, "Nope." So if this was in the NFL, they would be going, "Okay, we're looking for 2 feet down in bounds." And so, simple. Just no 2 feet down in bounds. We didn't see it. So at least you hear the dialect. So when you're hearing these controversial calls, like, was it a fumble or a catch? Did he have possession? You're at least hearing what they're going through. So you're hearing them talk about it. So you see their perspective. With current, NFL, you just hear the ruling, and a lot of times it can come out the blue because you have no clue what they were looking for or what they were looking at. So I'll let you go ahead with your. I just wanted to put that in there. Like, there's other sports have obviously done it better, so I think that the NFL needs to look at that.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think, especially with the new pass interference rules and the ability to challenge those calls, I feel like the need for transparency is almost greater now because fans, more so than ever, feel separated from the ruling and they don't feel a justification all the time. I feel like it would be better for progressing the game if you just get to hear and see the explanation as it's happening, seeing what they're looking at exactly and why they're going to the judgment or they're coming to the decision that they are. I thought that part was really cool. I really enjoyed the kickoffs. I feel like that's probably also helpful to player safety with them starting off facing each other and waiting for the returner to receive the ball. So it's not as dangerous as these guys running 60 yards downfield full speed and just trying to light somebody up. I also like the interesting conversion rules instead of just kicking an extra point after. I think that's a little gimmicky, if I'm being honest. But it's cool. It works. I don't think that would ever work in the NFL. But I do like that they make it more interesting and challenging by not just making it simple as just kick an easy extra point. Even with the NFL moving it back, I still feel like it's hard to make it worthwhile all the time. But I do like the fact that they've given it more options and possibilities for it to be competitive. So if you're down a certain amount of points, you can just go for 3 or go for 2 instead of going for 1. Stuff along that lines. But what about you? What are your favorite aspects that they developed, and what are your least favorite aspects?
Well, I wouldn't say I have necessarily a least favorite because I do kind of like everything they're doing. But my favorite, honestly, is probably pace of play. Just because, like I said, it is similar to soccer, so you have the running clock, and I just think it doesn't make the game feel like you're watching a marathon. You don't feel like you're sitting there and it just keeps going. It does feel quicker, and it doesn't allow teams to like constantly exploit like certain like little time. Like there's rules in like if you watch the Patriots Titans playoff game where they tend to do like foul like penalties to constantly continue the basically keep the clock running without having to involve it. This time just prevents that because it's automatically done, right? So I do like this, but honestly, the only thing I think I change is I kind of want to see this do 3 down the XFL, not the XFL, the CFL. That I think that would also make the game quicker, because you would see them constantly. It would make it more passing, and you have to go for bigger chunks, which would also increase pace of play. So, but in terms of overall viability, do you think the XFL can succeed? Will it succeed? And I guess if it will, or if it won't, why do you think it will or will not succeed?
This is a tough question. I think I don't know if I can necessarily say it will or will not succeed at this point. I would say I'm leaning towards if any of the new expansion football leagues are going to work, it would be the XFL, simply on the fact of the XFL's sizable backing. I mean, with the amount of money that has been put up front to support this endeavor by Vince McMahon, the chairman of WWE, as well as NBC has the other half of the backing of the XFL.
NBC, wait. Why does NBC? They don't even show any games on NBC. Why does NBC have it?
NBC Universal here. I'm pretty sure that is.
It's only shown on ABC or ESPN, and then Fox.
Yep, it's half owned by NBC and half owned by WWE, and their TV partners are ESPN, ABC, and Fox Sports.
What the hell? Okay, that's weird.
It's just there is a lot of money behind it. I think NBC has put it more so as an investment, not necessarily as a business operation, but almost as if they're trying to diversify their holdings. I think it's a smart move on their part, and I think also not showing it is actually a smart move on their part too, because then they get more money from it, because then now they sell the rights to it, and then they can make money through that by selling the rights to ESPN and Fox.
Well, I guess so. Whether I think it's successful or not, my answer is kind of hard, but I'm going to say no. And here's why. It won't be successful. Again, this is missing the mark, so I could be completely wrong. Most likely that will be true. That I will be wrong. But I'm going to say no just because it's hard for me. So the NFL, in terms of sustainability, maybe is the way to put it. I don't know if these players are getting paid enough with all the injuries that they'll incur to keep it up and running and as desirable as it is possibly now, just because it's the introduction and at least you're going to get some like airtime. But I think the biggest problem is football as a whole. It's not like other sports where there's like other leagues around the world that are smaller. It's like if it's not the NFL, it doesn't really succeed in the American market. Like even the CFL, that's really only like a Canadian. It's only successful in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to picture because even I just went on Twitter just to see the response, like the XFL after the first weekend, and there was just a lot of like, I don't know, it's this weird sentiment where it's like, it's not the NFL, so it doesn't matter, and it's bad football. It was kind of weird, but that was a lot of the sentiment I got just looking at Twitter. But then there was also a lot of people that were like, yes, this league looks fun. It looks more lighthearted. We love the sideline interviews where people are dropping in F-bombs on live TV. But it's going to be interesting to see just because there isn't exactly a track record of other leagues having success. And this goes back even further than the AAF or the XFL. There's been other leagues that haven't worked out. So we'll have to see.
I'm kind of desperate for it to work out because, in my opinion, I feel like there should be a minor league system or something of that nature in football. I don't think it should be identical to like baseball where it's lesser, but I do feel like players should get a shot. So if that does mean where it's like a farm system and that's what it develops into, I'm okay with that. But I do like the chance that the XFL provides for some of these athletes because I think a lot of people forget about this, but NFL Europe was actually not necessarily a financial success, but in terms of players, wasn't really a bad thing. It helped develop some pretty recognizable names. And also, yeah, it did develop players like Terry Crews who went on to act and things like that.
Well,
but
you know who ran the NFL Europe, right? Oliver Luck. And you know who's running the XFL right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oliver Luck. So I think the biggest problem with so if you're a football player, obviously, I think if you're a football player and you don't want the XFL to succeed, what's wrong with you? This is a backup plan. This is another avenue to get into the league.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of it being like, I don't know, I think injuries are just way too common in football, where it's really hard to make like a minor league thing happen. Like, and even so, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a successful minor league thing. Like, I'm going to say this. I have strong opinions about the NBA G League, and I think the G League's not being used in the right way. So I feel like the G League, instead of being a developmental league, it's more so these are the guys that aren't good enough to make it into the NBA. We put them here. So I feel like the XFL might fall more into that category of these aren't the guys that are good enough. We throw them in here. And maybe if they have, obviously like in the G League, if you have a really, really good season, you're probably going to get some interest from NBA teams. I feel like the XFL is going to be the same way, but I don't think it's going to be used more so to develop players. I think it's just going to be more so to see who's the cream of the crop of the XFL and then pick them up and put them in the NFL.
I think you're right, but I agree. I definitely think the XFL will become as a whole, almost like a farm system for undrafted and unsigned players who still want a shot at the NFL, and they go there and say they have an outstanding season. They're not going to stay. They're going to get picked up, and then they're going to be probably a second-string player in the NFL. But I'd still like to see it. I still want to see it succeed because I think that is a valuable tool. I mean, like I was saying before, NFL Europe produced some big names from William Refrigerator Perry to the big Kurt Warner is the most obvious, to even the most legendary kicker of all time in Adam Vinatieri. So,
I will say the Fridge went to NFL Europe after his NFL career. He ended his career with the NFL Europe. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. But he still helped propel the league, and is still a big name. And I mean, even James Harrison, if you want a more relevant developmental talent in the NFL Europe, but it works. It worked to some extent, and I think it's a valuable and viable asset to the NFL. I think if it's not necessarily viewed as a competitor and they work together, would be the most reasonable way for the XFL to survive. Because if it got backings from teams and say teams split, like since there's only 8 teams in the XFL, say 16 teams in the NFL decide to actually sign deals with the XFL, and then they use it and they can send down players to get more playing time. So you can develop your 4th through 7th round picks who aren't going to get much time besides the preseason, and actually see if they're a viable starter or if they're a viable weapon you want to incorporate in your offense or defense, more so than just coming in when there's an injury.
I guess, but I don't know how that would necessarily work with NFL roster sizes are already not comparatively not the biggest, and it's I guess just so how I just don't know how that would work. Like, would the person be an active member of an NFL roster but be playing in the XFL as well, or?
I could see it working like that. I could also see it working like maybe either 2-way contracts or just pure agreements with teams where it's like we have first dibs on signing with players, so therefore we can tell players, hey, we're interested in you, but we don't have room on our roster. So instead of people fighting for a practice squad spot for an NFL team could say, hey, we would want you to play in the XFL to see how good you are, and then we'll give you a call depending on how you play.
All right. It would definitely be something that would be interesting. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, the XFL is still young, and there's gonna be a lot of hiccups because you're just figuring out the league itself and how everything's gonna work. But we'll see. We'll check back in like a year and see how everything went after the season ended. But on a different note, we'll talk about we're gonna talk about the MLB again. And last episode we did talk about how the Astros cheating scandal were like the punishments enough. But obviously, if you've been following baseball at all, you've seen that there's been new progressions in the story. So firstly and foremost, the Astros came out, and ownership and many other players had what almost everyone deemed lackluster, unremorseful, unapologetic apologies that almost made people hate the Astros more, because first ownership was like, hey, we don't think it affected the games. We're just apologizing because we broke the rules. But it didn't affect us winning. It didn't help us win at all. And then the players came out, kind of just said, yeah, we're sorry, but they really didn't show that they were sorry. Like, just saying that you're sorry, but not even being willing enough to stand up to some questioning, it doesn't exactly help your case. So then recently also Dusty Baker pleaded to the MLB to protect Astros players, because obviously the consensus is they're most likely going to get plunked a lot. They're going to get thrown at many, many times this season. And so I guess first and foremost, we're going to start with what did you think of the Astros apologies, and how does this impact their players going forward, obviously with the chances of getting plunked? Does the MLB need to get involved? Because they're obviously going to get plunked a lot. So what should the MLB do, if anything, and how do they go about that?
Well, I think the smartest thing the MLB should have done was put reasonable punishments in the first place in the beginning. Like I mentioned in last week's episode, if you didn't catch it, go give it a listen. But if they would have given them more sizable punishments for what I see is practically a crime in terms of baseball's unwritten laws, I don't think you would have this risk of all these players getting plunked nearly as much because they would have felt justified in that they got the punishment they deserved. But now players feel and teams feel that the MLB didn't do enough, so they're going to take it into their own hands. And I can see where they're coming from. I would be very frustrated if I was a player and I worked my butt off to get to the point where I could compete in the postseason in the MLB, and then the reason you lose is not necessarily because the team is better than you, but because they're trying to cheat and use unfair and rule-breaking tactics to win. I don't think the MLB should really. There's nothing they could really do to counteract their players being in danger beforehand. I guess if they felt it was really bad, they could start throwing out major suspensions for players and teams that do that. So if say a pitcher hit like Altuve, they could suspend the pitcher for like 60 games and then fine the team a lot. But I mean, my problem is I see why the team would want to do that. Unfortunately, I don't think they should intend to injure somebody necessarily, but I can see why they're pissed off and very frustrated. I think the apologies to answer that question were terrible. They were just, let me read word for word what our PR firm wrote down for us, and then you kind of saw more so how the players really felt and follow-up questions, if they took any, that they really were sorry because we got caught is what it felt like. We got caught breaking a rule, but us breaking the rule didn't help us win. That's nonsense. I don't believe that at all, but that's how I feel. I don't think there's much the MLB can do at this point, and I think if they do decide to inflict punishment on the rest of the league instead of the Astros, that would cause so much more chaos in Major League Baseball than there already is from how poorly they've managed this scandal. I have no idea how the rest of the league would handle that.
So, this is what I'm going to say just as a blanket statement. We're going to see in the MLB this season the difference between throwing to send a message and throwing at people with intent. To send a message, I'm going to throw a fastball right at the hip of Jose Altuve. But now you're going to see people throwing with intent, and that's when you start going towards the head area. And if you didn't already see this, Dodgers fans, anytime the Astros are coming out to the West Coast, so for Arizona, San Diego, the Angels, Oakland, the Giants. I don't know if they're coming out to the Giants, but if they are, basically any games on the West Coast, Dodgers fans have been buying out those games. And remember, Dodgers fans are the people that kill the Giants fans. I would not be going to any games on the West Coast if I was an Astros fan. I think it's going to get really ugly. I guess the only way the MLB, I think, could regulate this beforehand is, so obviously for normal games that are high intensity, there was a fight the previous night or something, the MLB likes to throw warnings out pregame. So basically, one time you throw at somebody, you're done. You're gone. I feel like for a lot of the games, against the Dodgers, against the Yankees, you're probably going to have warnings from the offset. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to stop anybody. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I do think what the Astros need to do is just have a day to fix this and literally just take all the players out there that were on that World Series roster team and answer some questions. Because there's a lot of questions that still need to be asked. You're claiming you only did this in 2017. So why'd you stop? If you weren't caught then, Why would you stop? Then they're also, obviously we've all seen the video of Jose Altuve where he's run after he hit a walk-off home run, and he's basically pleading with his teammates to not rip off his jersey. And he went and then immediately got changed and then came back on the field. Like, there's a lot of things that still have to be answered for. And just running away from scrutiny does not help your case at all. So, it's going to be interesting to see how the Astros season goes, what all happens. It's one thing it has got me, though, is excited for opening day, because I just want to see the Astros on opening day, how everything goes down. But I guess also the MLB, of course, they can't stop saying and doing controversial things. So, they had to display, I guess, their proposed plan for the postseason expansion, I guess, where they're proposing to add to the number of wildcard teams and have top seeds in the postseason get the choice of who they play. And so from what I've seen, the main reason that they're doing this is because the MLB, more than basically any other sports league at the trade deadline, has the most movement with buyers and sellers. And there's a lot of teams that at that moment basically decide how the rest of their season's going to go. And the whole reason for adding wildcard teams is they're hoping it's going to get more teams interested in being buyers other than sellers and trying to go for a playoff spot midway through the season.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess let's hear your thoughts on the proposed plan. Do you like it, or do you? I forget the games, but they're going to shorten some series, I'm pretty sure, and makes I think there's going to be a 3-game series, maybe a couple. I forget all the games, how they're structuring the series, how long they're going to be, but they did do some changes to that as well.
Mm-hmm. I kind of agree with Trevor Bauer, I believe it was, who tweeted out in response to the proposal that Rob Manfred obviously is not focusing on what the players wanted to get changes about, especially his referencing of the Astro scandal, and Manfred's hopefully getting a better response to it, but that never really came. I don't know. I feel like it's almost a distraction tactic at this point. I don't know how genuine the proposal is, or if it was just Rob Manfred trying to go, hey, we're getting a lot of bad press right now. Let's get press on something else, to where at least they're talking about baseball, like the actual playoffs and what they like about baseball, because that's what people are thinking about. And a lot of the arguments he's making is, well, we like how the playoffs are set up, something along those lines, versus his new, which seems a little, it just doesn't seem very realistic to me. I feel like it's a sudden change for baseball, which is a very historic, traditional, in some senses, sport. I'm not a big fan of the proposal. I like the system that they have now, but what do you think?
Okay, well, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna say, be a bit more assertive than you were. I'm gonna say the proposal is stupid. It doesn't take away buyers and sellers at the trade deadline. It just changes the records of those buyers and sellers. Because baseball, the one thing about baseball is, comparatively towards other leagues, it's the top of the top more so than other leagues are in the playoffs. Like, these are your top teams. These are your top tier teams. There's only 2 wild cards, and then you have to win your division. And the wild cards eliminate one of them eliminates the other before they play again. Like, they can move on. So you're in the top of the top, right? With this, you're just making the quality of teams lesser. You're just making the buyers at the trade deadline teams that aren't as good. This is just degrading the quality of teams you're going to expect in the playoffs. I don't think it's going to change any of the things that they're hoping to. It will change. I think it just makes the playoffs worse. Not necessarily like the games worse, just the teams in the games worse. So, and I also understand the point that they're trying to get the balance of teams because you got the AL Central comparatively to the AL East. Obviously, you would rather have a couple teams from the AL East than being forced to just have your Central team kind of stink up the rest of the playoffs for everyone else. I understand that, but that's just not how it's going to work. I don't think adding the number of teams really helps that. You just got to try and focus on policies that would, help the AL Central maybe more so than just try and get a bunch of good teams, in the playoffs. Because I don't think it's gonna. I think they're looking at it too much as of what's happening now rather than what's gonna happen down the road. Because what happens when you gotta throw in a couple of wildcard teams and only the division leaders of like the AL are good. Now you look stupid when you got a really crappy team getting in because the AL wasn't as strong. Like, what if you got an NBA situation where the East, everyone knows the East is like comparatively a lot worse than the West overall. So what if you have like 1 year the NL is a lot worse than the AL? So you got only like 2 good teams from the NL and everyone else sucks. But you added a bunch of wildcard teams too, so you just prolong the suckage. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's all I gotta say about that. I think it's stupid. I mean, I guess the good thing is, even if it is real, and even if they want it to pass, I don't think it can. They said it wouldn't even be able to be implemented until like 2023 or something. So, I think it will get struck down because obviously there was a lot of player outcry towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of outcry, let's talk about the outcry from Man City ownership in regards to their Champions League ban and their 30 million euro fine. I believe it was euros. It might not have been euros. But regardless, so if you don't know the story, and maybe you're not, because this is, I'm assuming we have a lot of American listeners comparatively, but if you're not aware with the story, Man City, what they falsely reported revenues in regards to what deals, like sponsorship deals.
Mm-hmm. In terms of club licensing and big sponsorships for the team. One thing I would like to note is you were correct. It was 30 million euros, and another interesting fact is that's the largest penalty that has ever been handed out. So that's
like in any like this is like NFL. What the biggest fine in NFL was what $500,000 towards Belichick for Spygate. Like this is like way bigger comparatively to any other sport. But basically, so Man City, a bunch of false revenue reporting in terms of licensing and whatever. But so if you don't know what the Champions League is, basically explanation is it's the best of the European soccer leagues. They take like their best teams and they all play each other and like a tournament. And then it's called the Champions League, and then there's a level below called the Europa League. But so Man City, obviously, since they've had a lot of success in recent years, they've been in the Champions League a lot. So they're in a 2-year ban for this false reporting of revenues. And basically, Man City's biggest gripe, though, in regards to it is that UEFA was kind of the judge, jury, and executioner in this whole process, and obviously Man City's. So basically, back in like 2018, when the allegations were going to be first brought against Man City, it was obvious because they were from UEFA that they were going to get charged most likely. So Man City basically has said that since that point in 2018, they basically knew UEFA was going to prosecute them and like deem them guilty. And but obviously Man City knew this, so they were in charge. They were going to not charge. They were going to dispute the claim, and so Man City's obviously trying to get within like to an independent jury basically to prosecute the case, because since their argument is UEFA was the one who brought the case against them, then they were also the ones that set up basically the whole procedure, the whole ruling. They're the ones that set up how the ruling was going to go down, and then they were also the ones that decided the ruling. So from Man City's perspective, they don't think it's very fair, and so now we just wait, because it's obviously going to go to an independent jury, as I said before. So we're going to see. So is there anything you would like to add on this whole situation? Because it is a complicated situation, and obviously it's a big ban, bigger than you would see in any other sport, really, and a big fine to go on top of that.
The one thing I want to mention is it's just going to be tough from UEFA's point of view, because if they don't inflict the regulations, because the whole basis to me of their financial fair play regulations was to kind of make sure that the big clubs were held to the same standard that lower clubs were, and just because they're throwing around more money doesn't mean they don't have to follow the same rules. And I feel like if it is confirmed that if Man City is truly guilty of breaking these regulations and then they get out of it or avoid significant punishment, then that takes away all the powers of their governing body. They're not going to have any influence over the big clubs. It's literally just going to be the big clubs having influence over trying to pretty much gain one-ups on one another and most of the rest of the league to make sure that they can't really compete with them. But I think it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. But I do like how, was it not, you mentioned this before, was it not the owner a couple years ago said he'd rather spend all that money on...
Well, it was recently. Man City's owner said that he would rather spend like 30 million euros on lawyers to fight against this UEFA ban and basically make UEFA spend all the money to fight against it as well. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I'll say about it is, so the 30 million euros or whatever, if they did it, sure, that's a good, fair punishment. I don't like the 2-year ban from the Champions League, because the licensing issues and whatever did not actually have really anything to do with really what was happening on the field. It's not like Man City all of a sudden was able to beat the crap out of the teams just because they were the licensing, whatever. So having them not play, obviously so if you follow soccer, you'll know there's a lot of implications, because Pep Guardiola, Man City's coach, said that he thinks this was finally the time for Man City to win the Champions League. You can't win if you're not in it. And now there's restarting the rumors that Pep Guardiola is going to leave Man City. So obviously this ban has big implications beyond just the 30 million euro fine and the 2-year ban, because now Man City is looking at potentially losing their coach. So it is a big thing. I think I would have been fine with the 30 million euro punishment, not necessarily the 2-year ban, but So obviously it's not through yet, so we're going to see more development possibly within the story.
Mm-hmm.
But here's another great controversy, because the world of sports is always shrouded in controversy. The good old NHL Stadium Series, specifically the Colorado Avalanche versus the Kings of LA. They had a game at Air Force Stadium. I believe that's the full name of the Air Force Stadium, right? Just Air Force Stadium.
Mm-hmm. From the Air Force Academy in Colorado. So the final score 3-1. The game itself was actually pretty to watch. Tyler Toffoli ended up with 3 goals. The first outdoor hat trick in NHL history. Was really cool. The two teams did everything you could have asked for. They provided an excellent game. It was close all the way to the end until the empty netter with, like, what was it, 4 seconds left in the game for his hat trick. It's really good, really enjoyable hockey. But what was really the real clusterfuck of it was just the lack of organization around the fans. And if you've checked Twitter or saw anything on Twitter about it, people were very upset. People were demanding refunds. It was so crazy with the highway traffic and the lack of direction in terms of getting people to the stadium, managing the increase in walking traffic, especially driving traffic, parking traffic, things of that nature. I've heard there are plenty of stories online too that are talking about how crazy the concession stands were, that people sat in lines for hours. I mean, there was someone who mentioned that they got to the game 3 hours before puck drop, and they sat in the merchandise line until the second intermission, and by the time they got in the front, they were sold out of the Stadium Series jerseys. So it was really not well done, unfortunately, which is really sad. There was a lot of other bad things with it, including what I would be most upset as the front row seats had little to no visibility of the game. The angles of it were not good. Not what you would expect if you're paying that much money to sit that close. You would expect them to be making a diligent effort for your money to be worthwhile. But a lot of people were upset, demanding refunds. Crazy thing was a lot of people were getting in not until the midway through the second period into the second intermission, and at the same time a lot of people were leaving in order to beat the traffic so they wouldn't have to go through the same madness that they did coming in. So it was just not a well done performance by the NHL in terms of what the atmosphere they created for the fans. But the game itself was really good, which is just unfortunate that the fan experience wasn't as good as the on-ice experience.
So here's the biggest thing that I'm going to say. It wasn't just booked as a hockey game, right? It was booked as a hockey game with a concert. So naturally, you would think this is going to be a much bigger crowd than maybe your average hockey game. Not only is it a stadium series, so seating should be larger, right? There should be more capacity.
Mm-hmm.
You're also advertising the concert along with the same punk concert. So you might have people that aren't even necessarily hockey fans, but they said, might as well go see a hockey game, and we're going to have the same Hunt concert with it too. So it's a dual thing. So this could be your time to make an impression on some people, maybe. Maybe it's their first hockey game, but they saw Sam Hunt's there too, so you know what, they want to go and they're going to see both. And instead, if you knew there was going to be construction, there's no way this construction just popped up out of nowhere and happened on this one day, and they're like, oh crap, we screwed ourselves. Now there's construction out, there's going to be tons of traffic. You should have planned in advance to. And I didn't really like the NHL's explanation of, it was Air Force was kind of responsible for planning the whole logistics behind traffic and parking. It's like, well, maybe you should have stepped in and helped them.
Mm-hmm.
After all, you're the ones. You're also running this event. It's not just Air Force. So I don't know. It did feel like it's gonna be interesting to see. Do they give refunds? Has the NHL officially said anything? Like, have they made an official press release or anything like that?
At the time of this podcast, they have not come out with any official statements regarding refunds or any reimbursements for fans that struggled to get into the game, that missed the Sam Hunt concert in the first intermission, or anything of that nature. So the NHL has not released anything official yet.
And I would advise them to get on that as quick as possible, because if they don't, you know, they could have some problems on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
It is ridiculous, though, that I've never heard of really that people getting that late to a game, like that late, because it was insanely late. Like, I've heard of people, a big traffic, you missed the first quarter of a game or something like that, or maybe halfway through the first period of a hockey game you come in, but not hey, the second period just ended, we just got in, cool. Like, what? That's insane.
I mean, I can't imagine the frustration of fans, because you literally paid a lot of money. A lot of people traveled out to the game from LA, from across the country, because the Stadium Series is a cool once-in-a-lifetime kind of event. It's not that often that you'll see your team play outdoors and then there's a concert. It's a whole experience. The festivities are just not something you get every game, and there are people. The majority of people didn't get there until, like you said, the second period started, and I mean, I can't imagine how frustrated I'd be after paying all that money, traveling all the way there, getting the hotel, getting the flights, and then you literally come in for 20 minutes of action. You missed the concert, you missed the beginning of the game, you missed the whole set. Like, I would go nuts.
See, for comparison, so I saw, like, on TV a couple years ago when they were in Wrigley or whatever, and they've been to South Bend at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, for comparison, it would be like if I don't know if people remember when UNC and Michigan State played a game on the Battleship outdoors to kick off the season. Like, that was a pretty freaking cool thing. It would be like you had the opportunity to go onto this Battleship to watch this game. You decided you were going to go, and then they don't let people on till halftime. You would probably be pretty fucking pissed off. So it was obviously mismanaged. Hopefully for future Stadium Series games, NHL takes the logistics side and the traffic and parking and everything like that into more consideration. Learn from your mistakes. And I hope they make a statement soon. At least I would like to see them reimburse fans. But if they don't, at least make a statement explaining what you're going to do, what your course of action is. Don't just try and ignore it.
Or at the very least, they should just apologize. I mean, yeah, they did let the Air Force Academy be in charge of traffic. But that doesn't mean you can't send out something official and say, hey, we're sorry. At the very least, it doesn't take that much of time to do that. I do know that the NHL, while they haven't released anything on this officially, they have refused to comment. Many outlets such as ESPN and NBC Sports, Fox Sports have reached out and have gotten no comment from the teams, specifically the Avalanche, since it was considered a home game, and as well as the NHL front offices they're refusing to comment on anything about the game at the moment, and that's just kind of disappointing. You would think one of the big four sports leagues would at least apologize. Should reimburse with how chaotic it was and how much people missed out on, but to not even apologize is inexcusable.
Yeah, this bring up a good point because I kind of forgot about the Avalanche perspective because you kind of screwed over season ticket holders too. Like, because it's a good experience if you're a season ticket holder. You're like, this is awesome. I mean, it's just a however long drive just to Colorado Springs, but it's not too long. So I'm gonna go out there and it's gonna be this big event. And instead, they get screwed. Like now you gotta deal with season ticket holders, and this is a bad representation on you, even though it's not necessarily your fault. You're also gonna have to deal with this. So I don't know if I was a Avs management, I would be having a conversation with the NHL, trying to get this whole situation sorted.
Definitely.
Because this not only is this bad, but this also maybe creates hesitation in having another stadium series, especially at Air Force Stadium. Like, what are the odds that they ever go back there? Probably not great.
And it definitely hurts the fans that wanted to do it, because say if you have fans that just wanted to go to a stadium series game itself, they wanted to go to an outdoor NHL game. That's not something you get to do very often.
Well, yeah, and how many can be on the West Coast too? Not
so,
that many.
Just by
so now it's you're more likely to see another Notre Dame one than a Air Force Academy one, just because this one was poorly managed. So it's unfortunate. So, would you like to say anything to wrap it up here?
Yeah, I just would like to recap. Chaotic week for a lot of the big franchises here, or big sports leagues, from the MLB to Manchester City's ban to the NHL's poor management of their stadium series game out in Colorado. And the only bright light that we really talked about today was the XFL. As always, thank you guys for listening. We're glad to have you here, and listen to us next week when we break down NCAA basketball a little bit more with the season of parity, or is this really the season of upsets? We'll get more into that next week, so join us.
Permitted, crazy things in the sports world don't happen. All right. See you guys next week. Take care, everybody.